The film begins on the set of Edward, a man with neurofibromatosis, which causes his face to be disfigured by skin growths. After directing and having an awkward conversation with a colleague, Edward takes the subway home, where he feels like everyone is staring at him. At home, he notices that a new neighbor is moving into the next apartment. Movers carrying furniture accidentally scratch Edward's door. In addition, in the kitchen, he notices that something is dripping from the ceiling and puts a bowl under it. Then he prepares dinner, while simultaneously listening to an instructional video for artistic whistling. Edward is distracted by the doorbell, and in his fright, he accidentally cuts his hand with a knife. Ingrid, his new neighbor, appears on the threshold, who wants to apologize for the damaged door. Noticing the wound, she offers to help him treat it, for which she brings a first aid kit from her apartment. While she bandages the wound, she supports the neighbor in a friendly conversation, which is somewhat unusual for a shy guy. The girl notices a red typewriter and tells her that she dreams of becoming a playwright. Edward visits a doctor who is being monitored for his illness. The doctor talks about a new experimental treatment that, in theory, can cure his facial growth, but since it involves certain risks, he suggests that the patient think about everything first. Returning home, Edward sees that the damaged door is painted bright red, and the paint stains lead to Ingrid's apartment. In the kitchen, the leak from the ceiling has increased, forcing him to put more dishes. Then he goes to his neighbor's house to congratulate her on her housewarming and give her a typewriter. The conversation is interrupted by another guy who comes to visit the girl. Going down the stairs, Edward runs into a neighbor from apartment 4B whom his appearance repels. Edward goes to another audition, where, besides him, there are plenty of other applicants without visible physical defects. The only role he has received during his entire acting career is a social advertisement designed to convince people to fight prejudice against people with unusual appearance. Later, Edward shows it to Ingrid when she came to visit, and she removes a speck of dust from his face. This guy, whom no one except doctors touched on the face, interprets as a signal of sympathy, which leads to an awkward misunderstanding. The neighbor hurries to leave, promising to bring a special face cream later. After this incident, Edward decides to enroll in an experimental treatment program at the clinic. He is examined, tests are performed, and measurements are taken from the skin growths on his face. Before giving the medicine, he is treated with a knife cut. The nurse tries to suppress her disgust at the sight of him. In the park, Edward enviously notices a neighbor from 4B who is walking with a beauty. Passing by the living statue of Lincoln, he looks closely at the masked animator, but he does not show that he is uncomfortable. When Edward leaves, the animator looks in his direction. At home, Edward finds gifts from Ingrid near the door: conditioner for washing, sweets, promise cream, and a note printed on the typewriter he gave them. When he eats sweets in front of the TV, a piece of plaster and boards falls off the leaking ceiling. Edward goes to bed, but in the middle of the night, he is awakened by a demanding knock on the door. The landlord and paramedics are on the doorstep. They have the wrong apartment. They need to go to 4B, where the tenant hanged himself. Edward, along with other onlookers, watches as the body is removed and notices the orphan cat. Later, he and the cat look out the window as the medics load the corpse into the car. Edward and Ingrid go to a cafe to eat pizza and discuss what happened with a neighbor. Suddenly, a random passerby knocks on the window, waving at Edward as if he were an old acquaintance. After confessing in response, the man says that he is often confused with someone else. Returning home, Edward examines the leak in the ceiling, and a couple more pieces fall off, falling on his head. Wiping away the blood after the blow in front of the mirror, Edward notices that a piece of skin is just coming off. He goes to the hospital, where the doctor says that these are the consequences of experimental treatment. As a souvenir, Edward is given a mask made from an impression of his face and exactly repeats his appearance. Edward is getting sick. He goes into a bar to throw up in the bathroom and then orders a drink. Here he is approached by one of the visitors, who says that he has already seen him somewhere. Edward is not in a great mood to communicate, as he feels sick, and as a result, he throws up right behind the bar. When he returns home, he sobs in bed, either from pain or from shame for the shame he has experienced. Rubbing his face with his hand, he notices that the skin is peeling and peeling off, and begins to peel it off like a peel from an onion. By morning, there was almost no trace of the old growths. A new face is looking at him in the mirror. In a safe neighborhood, Where there is no risk of ridicule, Edward returns to the same bar where he previously threw up. He orders a whiskey and joins some company celebrating the victory of his favorite team in the match. A pleasant evening ends in the bathroom, where some lady makes him feel good with a light hand. Returning home in the early morning, Edward examines himself in the mirror, after which he goes to bed in his clothes. But they don't let him sleep. A repairman knocks on the door to fix a hole in the ceiling. One of the doctors who watched Edward comes in through the open door. He wonders why he hasn't been to an appointment for a week. Being unrecognized with the new appearance, Edward replies that the old Edward committed suicide. He presents himself as a different person. Ingrid overhears this conversation. The story moves forward some time. Guy moved into a new apartment and became a successful real estate agent. His face is emblazoned on the advertising posters of the company where he works. One day, Guy notices Ingrid on the street and, succumbing to emotions, decides to follow her. A girl comes to a small theater on Broadway where there is a casting for her first play called Edward. Noticing Guy, Ingrid mistakes him for another actor and invites him to read the text. In the process, the man realizes that the play is about a woman's friendship with a man with physical appearance defects. Ingrid wrote the script based on her friendship with him. Guy arrives at the next casting wearing a mask left over from the doctors, which is an exact replica of his face before he was cured. Struck by his appearance and timid stiffness, he so accurately fits into the character's image that Ingrid appoints Guy to the main role, not knowing that it is his face that is the prototype of her hero. Later, she and Guy go to a bar and then go to Ingrid's to continue the evening. Guy notices the typewriter he gave her, but the girl says she doesn't use it. She tries to seduce him, but out of old habit, Guy, being still a virgin, gets shy. Ingrid has to be persistent to get him into bed and take off his pants. One day during another rehearsal, Oswald, a man with neurofibromatosis, who looks just like Edward before, comes into the theater. He was advised to come to the casting, but when he saw that the role was already taken, Oswald politely says goodbye and leaves. Ingrid watches him go for a long time, and then asks Guy to put on a mask during sex. However, this face makes her laugh, and that's where the passion ends. Laugh, and that's where the passion ends. When Guy and his real estate colleagues celebrate another successful deal at the bar, Oswald approaches him to say hello. Colleagues are fascinated by the sociable man, and despite his appearance, offer to have a drink with them. Guy finds it unpleasant to see how easily and naturally Oswald gets along with people. It's like he's looking into a crooked mirror. At the next rehearsal, Guy is arguing with Ingrid, discussing the character, when Oswald appears. Ingrid invites him to watch the rehearsal, and after that, the whole troupe goes to the bar. Oswald charms the whole company, while Guy becomes more and more depressed and looks like a pale shadow against the background of a new friend. After talking with Oswald, Ingrid spends the whole night rewriting the script, making changes under the influence of his charm. The next rehearsal takes place with makeup applied, but the pads keep falling off Guy's face while he emotionally reads the text. Returning home, he meets Oswald in the park, who kindly invites him for a drink. Sitting in a bar, it turns out that Oswald does not work anywhere, but lives off of once successful investments. Guy is surprised that his new friend is familiar with beautiful girls, despite his appearance. He himself is too clamped down and insecure, and Oswald is not at all shy of the stage and happily sings karaoke. At this time, Guy examines the visitors, surprised that no one looks at each other with disgust. Everyone is busy with their own business and even laughing not at him, but at their jokes. Soon, Ingrid makes the logical decision to give the main role to Oswald, leaving Guy for the final metaphorical scene when the heroine looks at Edward with loving eyes and sees him handsome. Gritting his heart, Guy agrees because he doesn't have a choice anyway. The premiere of the play starring Oswald is taking place soon. After the performance, Guy sits resentfully on the sidelines, while Ingrid and Oswald bask in the glory. The next day, he reads the reviews in the newspaper, which also criticize his role. Ingrid then informs him that there is no need for him to appear on stage as a transformed hero. Guy is no longer involved in the production. Guy listens to this with a stony expression and the pain of betrayal in his heart. Later, he jealously watches Oswald, who has taken a new passion for himself, who is well aware of his injuries. Upset to the core, Guy enters his old apartment and, breaking the ceiling with a mop, calls a repairman. Then he sits on the floor all night wearing a mask of his former face, reflecting on the vicissitudes of fate. He never became happy with his new appearance, and Oswald, despite his own, gets along well with people. Apparently, it's not about looks. Trying to sort out his feelings, Guy goes to work in a mask, imitating his previous illness. He shows the apartment to potential buyers, but his appearance and habits frighten the little girl and alarm her parents. After that, Guy is fired in disgrace. Plunged deeper into stress, he goes to the theater, where he disrupts the performance by running onto the stage in a mask and starting a fight with Oswald. Although the guards try to get the violent spectator out, the incident ends with the props falling from the ceiling and then the lighting fixtures right on Guy. In the next scene, a movie play takes place with a cast on Guy. Days pass. Guy lives with his ex-lover and her new boyfriend. He blames them for his injuries, and when the bones heal, a period of physical therapy begins. A special nurse is hired for this purpose. However, he speaks negatively about Oswald's appearance behind his employer's backs, which infuriates the injured Guy, because he himself was like that. Guy takes advantage of the moment and attacks the medic with a knife, strangling him during a brief fight. Guy was sent to prison for the murder. There he remains silent, reads books with a frown on his face, plays basketball with his head. In general, he does everything that a personal carer should do. Years later, when the term has come to an end, Guy is released. He walks down the street and is noticed by Oswald, who invites an old friend to a restaurant to celebrate his release. At the restaurant, Guy learns that he and Ingrid are still married, engaged in creative work, and plan to move to Canada, where they will live among sectarians practicing nudism, free love, and drug use. Guy listens to them in silence. When it's time to place an order, he can't make up his mind. Oswald notes that his old friend has not changed at all. Guy looks at the camera and smiles, realizing that he has remained the same weak-willed person he was before, and looks have absolutely nothing to do with it. That's where the movie ends.